Steve here. It's the show where I answer your questions, and this week's first question comes from Patrick Dodds. Steve, when I was younger, I had a teacher who made it a policy to not laugh at dangerous things, believing that it made us more desensitized to danger. That's always stuck with me. Perhaps it's in the same school of thought why feminists condemn rape jokes for making light of rape. Do you think if infotainers like Stephen Colbert, Samantha Bee, John Oliver, etc., as informative as they are, in their own way do a disservice to the public in making light of the appalling things done by the Trump administration? Do you think it contributes to apathy? I'd be really curious about your position on this. I hate to repeat myself from last week, but that's actually a lie. I love repeating myself. It's so much easier that way. But at the risk of repeating myself from last week, I think it is down predominantly to the delivery, to how one goes about making light of the terrible things. In the case of people like Colbert or Samantha Bee or John Oliver, I think they are able to get laughs out of things like the awfulness coming out of the Trump administration, without taking the edge off of the things themselves. And I think that's what good political satire should do. What I do think is a danger is when people engage in kind of toothless satire, where the satire itself is sort of, oh, what a goofy guy, like Jimmy Fallon. I haven't watched his Tonight Show since he did the hair mussing thing with Trump, because I thought that was just ridiculous and incredibly irresponsible, because what that did was it took this incredibly dangerous, bigoted person like Trump. And here's Jimmy Fallon, the host of this highly rated late night talk show, saying, what a goofy guy. I hated that. And I think that sort of thing is harmful in the way you're suggesting, Patrick. Not hard-edged, angry, biting political satire that makes us think and proves a point while it's making us laugh. But stuff like the sort of flabby, lightweight stuff that people like Fallon do, where they're just like, oh, just come on the show and we'll just have some fun. And when they do that with really dangerous, harmful, toxic people, I think that is the sort of thing that you're talking about in your question. Bruce Bardup, Steve, have you ever argued or discussed something with, say, an anti-feminist who just can't seem to follow simple logic even though they are quite smart? Try this. A says S makes videos saying nasty things about A, so the supporters of S come give her insults to bombs. S says report from official body P clears him of such responsibility. P didn't examine the videos and so did not report specifically on whether S is or is not responsible at all. Therefore, S is incorrect to say that P cleared S. I mean, is that hard? I swear, man, it's like logic went on holiday. Thanks for the work. Keeps me sane. Well, thank you as always for the support, Bruce, and for the comments and the questions. Yeah, it's not hard. And it's so easy, in fact, that in many cases, and especially in the case of S, I think the obvious conclusion is that they're just being willfully disingenuous. They know everything that they're doing. They're completely aware, and they do it anyway because they're intentionally presenting a narrative that will paint them in the most positive light, that will paint them as completely innocent and just these upstanding people who all they want to do is have discussions. They care about debate and intellectual discourse. And of course, it's completely unfair to say they make careers of harassing women. Even though anyone outside of their cultish fan bases who looks at the situation would be hard-pressed not to conclude that that is exactly what is happening, that these people harass women predominantly, and also some men, for their job, for a living. That's what they do. There's nothing remotely respectable about anything that they do, but they insist otherwise, and they take every opportunity to paint themselves as these, great philosophers and champions of free speech and political and social discourse, when they're nothing of the kind. And I think most of them probably realize that. But they know that their followers don't, or at least don't care. So, I mean, Yeah, do they see the logic? They probably do. They probably do. But it doesn't matter. Samuel Sturgill, thank you for answering my question about to just be myself to attract a lady. And it does work in a way, but the problem I have is that most ladies around where I live already have boyfriends and stuff. And I was wondering where are a good place to meet new people without looking like a weirdo. I've answered questions like this in the past, and the only answer I could give you is the same basic answer that I've given other people, and that is, number one, I'm not the best person to ask. So take whatever advice I give you with a grain of salt, please. But my advice would be to try and place yourself in social situations where you can just meet people. Go to events where people with common interests with you will congregate. You know, like if you're interested in writing, maybe sign up for a writing class at the local community college. If you're interested in art, sign up for an art class or a dance class. You know, if there's like a comic convention or a horror movie convention or something that you're into, you know, that is in your area, that is not that expensive that you can go to, go to something like that. You know, go to places where people who share your interests will be, and just try to make friends, you know, and see where it goes from there. That's the best advice I can give you, because in my experience, forcing something or going out with the intention of, okay, I'm going to meet a girl tonight, or I'm going to meet a girl at this thing or whatever, that's just not a good way to go about it. The best thing that I can tell you is to just put yourself out there in social situations where people who you are likely to have something in common with and get along with will be. And just, you know, start connecting with people. And it might take a while, but hopefully, eventually, you'll connect with someone who sees you in, you know, a flirtatious or romantic way, and you see them the same way, and you'll hit it off. You'll have some chemistry, and you'll go from there. J. Dotify, Steve, you've probably just heard about this. Tory MP Anne Morris, quote, "The UK leaving the EU without a Brexit deal is a real N-word in the woodpile." Really? WTF, is this 1950 or 2017? Okay, she's been suspended, but I do worry that this is actually the normal behavior of the backbenchers of the Tory party when they're behind closed doors, and she was just unlucky that it slipped out like a fart in an elevator when she was being recorded. What do you think of this? Personally, I think the party needs to sack her immediately, and there needs to be a by-election. To me, anything less is just a tacit acceptance of the racism in the right of the party. This sort of thing coming out in public seems like it would be extreme even by Republican Tea Party standards. Yeah, it would be extreme in the terms of the language being used. I think most Republican politicians who have ascended to the level of, like, for over there it would be Parliament, over here it would be Congress, have enough common sense that they would not pronounce the N-word. You know, they would say their racist stuff using different vocabulary. They wouldn't say that word because they're smart enough to know that if anybody records them saying that word, then they're through. I think they'll probably make a big deal out of, oh, this doesn't represent our values, this is absolutely revolting, this is disgusting, this is unacceptable, this person has to go. And then all the people who think the same thing will just be smarter about saying it from now on. And I think that's ultimately the real problem. And you're right, it does promote this notion that these kinds of ideas, that this sort of thinking is acceptable, is tolerable, as long as you keep it down low. Don't come out with it. It's okay to be low-key racist. It's okay to be racist in a way that is deniable. Just don't come out with it. That was her real mistake. And yeah, you're right. It creates a culture of acceptance of racism. But they can say, oh no, I hate white supremacy, I hate racism. See, didn't you hear what I said? And as long as they keep the N-word out of their mouth, a lot of people will buy that. So yes, you're absolutely right. Even if they do punish her severely for saying the N-word and for voicing that kind of vile racism in public, even if they do punish her harshly, the culture in which people like her are allowed to thrive will continue. And that's really the problem. And it's a problem over here, as well as over there. SCAS Films. So I don't watch a lot of your stuff, but I still hope you would answer this question. So what would it take to change your view on making friends or joining discussions with anti-feminists? This is not a trap question. It depends very much on what you mean by make friends and have discussions. I am always open to speaking to people in private through email. Not everybody, of course. People who have spent years harassing me and abusing me and degrading me and my family can fuck off and go to hell, no matter what, you know, line they try to contact me through. But just a random person who wants to talk to me about something. I mean, I'm open to behind the scenes private discussions about stuff if I think it's a discussion worth having when I read the email or whatever. But in terms of having public hangouts or public debates where I argue with anti-feminists, I just think, for me personally, I think that's a waste of time. And I don't really foresee anything that would change my thinking on that. I think most of the people who make, all of the people who make their living or have a lucrative YouTube channel built around anti-feminist content are professional trolls. And they thrive on attention, and they thrive on generating content through hostility and conflict. And me, or any person perceived as an SJW, going on their show and giving them content and giving them material, I think is counterproductive. So for me personally, I don't ever want to do that. But as I've said before, if other people think that there's something to be gained from that and they want to do that, then that's their choice, and I don't necessarily hold that against them. But yeah, in private, if somebody writes me an email and asks me a question that I think is being asked in good faith and is a question I feel comfortable answering, then I'm willing to talk to people behind the scenes. But to make a show out of it, to give terrible, shitty people more content, and not only that, but my time and attention and labor, no, I don't see any reason to ever do that. LowZGamer64. Hello, Steve. I'm fairly young at 15, but I was hoping you'd be able to provide me with a different perspective. I've been involved with the other side of the fence, so to speak. My father is a bit of an anti-feminist, but has never said that directly. I personally believe in equal rights for the genders, though I don't think it's best to specify here how many there are. My concern is that the term feminist or feminism has gained a bad reputation from all of the extreme feminists that go completely overboard. From what I know, you have stated you are a feminist. I apologize if that's incorrect. So basically what I'm asking is that you explain your opinion of what makes someone a feminist, and perhaps, if you could, I'd like to see your opinion of the extreme feminists out there. As far as extremist feminists, giving feminism a bad name and what I think about that, in my experience, most people who are identified as extremists by non-feminists or anti-feminists are actually not very extreme at all. Most anti-feminists show themselves to be very poorly read and very poorly informed about feminism in general, and specifically about which people and which voices within feminism carry a lot of sway and a lot of influence. So usually when people talk about, oh, so-and-so is an extremist feminist, that person is either being taken out of context and being painted as much more extreme than they are, or they are actually voicing a very extreme opinion, but they are virtually powerless within the overall movement. They don't have a lot of influence. They don't have a big following. They aren't a voice that is listened to or deferred to very often. They are basically a fringe member of the feminist community. As far as what makes someone a feminist, what's the definition of a feminist? A feminist is someone who believes in gender equality. And it's called feminism because of the two predominant genders. And I don't believe that there's a gender binary. I don't want to say that, I don't want to give the impression that there's only men and women. I believe that gender is a spectrum, and that there are certainly more than two genders. But of the two most commonly found genders, let's just say male and female, there is definitely an imbalance that favors men and that works against women. Women are on the short end of the male-female gender gap, and so if you want to attain gender equality, you need to work to empower and lift up women so that they achieve the same level as men. That's what a feminist is. That's why it's called feminism. And there are all kinds of schools within that. There are all kinds of theories within that. There are people who disagree with each other vehemently over what the goals of feminism should be, over how those goals should be pursued. But in general, A feminist is someone who believes in gender equality and believes in achieving gender equality by advocating for the rights and the empowerment of women. And if that's what you believe in, then in my opinion, a feminist is what you should want to be called. Joe McClory, what are your general feelings about the press right now? Personally, I am torn, seeing how hard they are working stories about the administration, and it is hard not to view it as standing up to the power in the name of the truth. But at the same time, the cynic in me can't help but see how well ratings and other sorts of news traffic has increased, and the dogged reporting could easily be explained by the bottom line, particularly with how little press is covering the damaging but less interesting evils the administration and GOP are doing. Yeah, I know how you feel. I feel similarly. Whenever you factor in commerce with journalism, it makes things very, very muddled, and it's difficult to know where I stand or how to feel about things. On the one hand, it's great to see the Washington Post and the New York Times and CNN and all these other mainstream media outlets really going hard on the Trump-Russia stuff and corruption within the Trump administration in general, and really trying to hold these people accountable and expose the misdeeds of these people. I think I'm behind that 100%, and I think that's exactly what the press should be doing, and that's what their job is. That's their value in our society, to speak truth to power and to tell the people the truth about what is going on with their leaders. But yeah, I mean, a few months ago, before Trump won the election, CNN was not going nearly as hard. They were putting Trump on TV. They were showing a live shot of an empty lectern with Trump Pence 2016 on it, because they knew that people would watch TV whether if Trump was going to be there, no matter what he was doing. And their coverage was not nearly as critical as it could have been or should have been. And it seems like it was very much driven by the ratings. Well, people will tune in if they're flipping past the channels and they see Trump, they'll stop and they'll watch. So let's just do that. So yeah, it's difficult not to be cynical about it. I'm with you. It's a combination of being proud when I see the New York Times and the Washington Post stepping up to the plate and just hammering relentlessly on Trump and his administration. But at the same time, it's hard not to be a little cynical about it and a little resentful that they weren't doing that with just as much vigor the entire time leading up to the election. Yeah. But sometimes you find your motivation a little late in the game. Maybe that's what happened. Like now, I feel like I'm finding my motivation at this late stage of the video, because I'm about to transition from the main part of the video where I give all these long-winded fucking answers to questions to something a lot peppier and a lot snappier. It's a little something I like to call the lightning round. Leto Anor, hey Steve, how are you today? I have nothing to ask, but I want to participate. Don't judge me, okay? I am doing just terrific. Thank you so much for asking, and thank you for participating. Joshua Purvis. Hi, Steve. My question is, what are some of your favorite TV shows? I like The Munsters, Addams Family, and Andy Griffith Show. Thanks. I enjoy your channel. Thank you as always for your question, Joshua. I guess you're talking about like maybe classic TV shows, because The Munsters and the Addams Family and Andy Griffith aren't exactly current. My classic top three is All in the Family, I Love Lucy, and The Twilight Zone. I love all three of those shows more than I can say. So my version of The Munsters, The Addams Family, and The Andy Griffith Show would probably be that. It would be All in the Family, I Love Lucy, and Twilight Zone. Gwen No Fear. Hey, Steve. Are you familiar with the works of Ursula Le Guin? Have you read J.R.R. Tolkien or George R.R. Martin? What are your thoughts on them and the high fantasy genre in general? Thank you and take care. I've never read Ursula Le Guin. I've never read George R.R. Martin. I've read just the tiniest bit of Tolkien in school. We read The Hobbit. And I had a friend who was like a super Tolkien nerd in high school. And through him, I borrowed, I think, the Fellowship of the Ring, the first of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and read some of that. But I'm not a high fantasy fan in general. I've talked about this before. It's just not my thing. I just find it dull. I find it boring. It's not something I've been drawn to. The whole swords and sorcerers, dragons, magic thing, just if you like it, more power to you. I'm not trying to shit on your favorite thing, because a lot of people love it, but I just don't get it. It's just not my thing. Lucas Hackett, hey Steve, what is hands down the worst beer you've ever tasted in your life? I say that because it is my drunken right to say so. Worst beer. I'm not a beer aficionado, so I don't have like a huge selection to draw from. You know, the first beer I ever drank, I think, was a Coors Light. And I think it's probably the worst that I've ever had. Coors Light is not my favorite. A light, sort of light Pilsner in general is not my favorite. You know, like Natty Light is not my favorite. Pabst Blue Ribbon. I just don't care for the you know, the ones that people say taste and look like piss. I'm just not a fan of those. But you know, I'm not a huge fan of craft beer either. You know, because I think that tends to be a little heavy. So I don't know. Like I used to really love Yangling, but I can't drink Yangling anymore because the owner endorsed Trump, and I'm not here for that. But yeah, probably Coors Light, my least favorite. Scott Bresinger, here's a joke in search of a punchline. Can you help me out? How many anti-feminists does it take to screw in a light bulb? Feminists change light bulbs. Anti-feminists blame feminists for the light going out in the first place. But you'll never see an anti-feminist changing a light bulb. Anti-feminists will complain about the darkness, and they will blame the feminist who is changing the light bulb for putting out the light in the first place. Actually, someone responded to your comment and had a really good one. That one was much better than mine. So go with that one. Mine was a little too wordy and clunky. Vitamin W, will there be a crossover between the Stuffyverse and the Opinionverse? Also, will real life Steve and Stuffyverse Steve ever meet? I don't want to give anything away, but at some point in the future, I think there will be some form of crossover between the Stuffyverse and Opinionville. And no, I have no plans for real life Steve to meet Stuffyverse Steve, because that would rip off Jason. And I try not to rip off my friend on purpose. Every once in a while I do something that he has already done some form of in a previous like Opinionville video, but I try not to do it on purpose. So I'm not going to do that, no. Radical Bacon, what would Millicent do if she found out she was part Alaskan Malamute? Oh, I don't think she would like that. Actually, since you brought that up, let me tell everybody. Next week is episode 250 of this series. And as I usually do for milestones in the You Had to Ask series, I will open it up next week to questions not only for me, but to the Steve and Stuffy gang. So, Radical Bacon, if you want to ask your question of Millicent next week, I can ask Millicent herself next week what she would do if she found out she was part Malamute. And if anybody watching has a question for Stuffy or Toby Benson or Jack McPherson or Wilhelmina or Hans Krieger or Prospector Jones or me, feel free to ask it in the comments to this video. I'll remind you again at the end, but we're doing that next week. Questions not just for me, but also for the Stuffy gang. Maybe Millicent will answer your question next week. Lily Blooms, I started my drift into a vegan lifestyle about 10 years ago and really struggled at first. That all changed when I began growing my own veggies. Fresh produce made a world of difference. Do you keep a garden? No, I don't right now. My place where I live, there's not really a spot for a garden. When I grew up as a kid, my mom and dad had a garden in our backyard, and we grew fresh vegetables for a few years. And that was always really nice. Fresh carrots or fresh squash we grew one year. That was wonderful. And yet, just in general, not growing them myself, but just going to a farmer's market, or even just going to the produce section of the supermarket and getting fresh produce instead of like bagged or canned or frozen. It makes a huge difference. I agree with you completely. Fresh vegetables are definitely the way to go. Short Life. Steve, did I make a mistake by becoming a female atheist? There's so much sexism and lack of empathy for women amongst atheists. Do I belong in a boys' club? No, and it shouldn't be a boys' club. And you're completely right. And I am, completely on your side. You're right. There's way too much sexism. There's way too much tolerance of misogyny and sexism. Way too much hand waving it away. Way too many people contributing to an incredibly negative, hostile environment for women in atheist circles, and it's bullshit, and it shouldn't be that way, and somebody should do something about it. And I'm doing my best to try and push back against that. And a lot of other people too. I'm not the only white male cishet atheist who notices that this is a problem and is really concerned about it and wants to be a good ally to women in the movement and try to help change things. I don't know how long it will take. I don't know how successful it will be. But you are completely right. It is a boys' club right now. It certainly feels that way a lot of the time, and it shouldn't be. And you shouldn't have, as a female atheist, you shouldn't have to ask yourself this question. You shouldn't have to look around at your fellow atheists and go, shit, do I belong here? It's awful, and it's inexcusable, and it should change. Hey, what a great note to end on. That's the end of the questions. It's time now for the shout out. And the shout out this week, speaking of journalism, speaking of investigative journalism, the shout out this week goes to an organization that is a non-profit investigative journalism newsroom that does journalism in the public interest. A lot of you have probably heard of it, ProPublica, because as Joe mentioned in his question earlier, as great as the mainstream media's investigative journalism has been of late, as awesome as it is to see the Washington Post or the New York Times just going out there and kicking ass, those are for-profit enterprises. There is unfortunately a commercial element to what they do. They have to sell papers and they have to maintain a strong bottom line. And ProPublica is a nonprofit, and it is able to focus on the work and what they think is important and what they think they should be reporting on for the public good, not just what will get them ratings or get them views and clicks and likes. So ProPublica is definitely an organization that deserves your support in this perilous era of the Trump administration, where honest, straightforward, independent journalism is more important than it has ever been. So please check out ProPublica. And also, please check out the Lemme Listen family of podcasts. These are podcasts that are created by my very good friend, Jason Harding, the puppet master of Opinionville. And there's a whole slew of amazing, wonderful, excellent Lemme Listen podcasts. But I specifically want to draw your attention to the Late Seating podcast, because that's the one that Jason co-hosts with me. And it's a movie podcast where we review classic films, films that have a reputation of either being good or bad. We review the movie, we run through a synopsis, we make fun of it, and we decide for ourselves whether the movie deserves its reputation, whatever that reputation may be. You can listen to our most recent episode, which is a review of the 1974 murder mystery, Murder on the Orient Express. And you can also get ready for our new episode, which will go up next week, which will be a review of the classic 1980s action movie starring Tom Cruise, Top Gun. So do your homework and go watch Top Gun between now and next Friday, and you can have the pleasure of getting all the jokes and all the weird little references that we make in our Top Gun review. You can listen to all of the past episodes of Late Seating and all of the episodes of all of the awesome Lemme Listen podcasts by going to lemmelistenpodcast.com. And you won't be sorry. You might be. I don't know. It's all a matter of taste. I don't think you'll be sorry. Anyway, I hope you're not sorry that you watched this, because this is the end of the video. I want to remind you, as always, please leave a comment on this video asking me your question for next time. You can ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious. Nothing is too silly. I will answer as many of your questions in the next video as I can, but for that to happen, you have to ask. And a reminder, as I mentioned in the lightning round, next week is episode 250. So as a special bonus for the milestone, if you have a question, not just for me, but for Stuffy, for Toby Benson, for Jack McPherson, for Millicent, for Wilhelmina, for Hans Krieger, for Prospector Jones, for any of the cast members of the Stephen Stuffy videos, please throw in a question for one of them, because Stuffy and company will be answering your questions next week as well. So a question for me, a question for Stuffy or any member of the Stuffy gang, that's next week for the 250th episode. Ask your questions in the comments of this video, if you please. Thank you for watching. Take care, everybody. Hey folks, one more thing before I go. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. And also, please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Steve Shives to become a patron.